Leland Vittert joining us right now, host of NewsNation's On Balance. Always good to have you here. Leland, President Biden saying that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to change. We've seen him be critical of the Prime Minister in years gone by, but particularly with this war, it seems as though he's becoming a little bit more vocal as of late. Those around the world, including in the UN, assembly members have been decidedly anti-Israel. I'm just going to spit it out. How much sway does Washington have when it comes to this war?
Yeah, Adrienne, I think you make a very good point, and I would add to that the president in those remarks said that international pressure is turning against Israel. This is the administration continuing to tighten the leash, if you will, that the Israelis have been given. You'll remember right after October 7th, it was basically a hunting license with no bag limit for Israel, and now the U.S. is trying to really rein them in. This has to do with the domestic political consideration for President Biden, because obviously the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party has made itself very well known and has increased the pain on the White House significantly in terms of what's happening in Gaza, and tried to force the administration to rein in the Israelis, and pressure runs downhill, so do other things. So that's what we're seeing happen. I would argue, having spent 4 years in the Middle East and in Israel and know the Israeli military pretty well, if anything, this is going to flip on the administration and force the Israelis to become more aggressive because they're not going to give up their ability or their desire to eliminate Hamas. And therefore, they're going to feel as though time is running out, so they'll become more aggressive in their tactics and push harder. And I think that the language that President Biden used is pretty troubling. He said that the Israelis are indiscriminately bombing. That was one word that was being used. Well, if they were indiscriminately bombing Gaza, this thing would be over on October 10th or 11th, because they would have leveled Gaza, and Gaza would cease to exist, as would all the people in it. So I'm curious as to how the administration is going to square that circle, because indiscriminate bombing has some serious implications to it. And so far, the administration hasn't put any evidence forth that that's what the Israelis are doing.
And there are claims that it is Netanyahu who has politicized this. While those words, the use of the term indiscriminate, certainly could be considered politicking. But Netanyahu has rejected this U.S. proposed blueprint for post-war Gaza, using the Palestinian Authority as rulers to replace Hamas. Netanyahu also saying that he will not allow Israel to repeat the mistake of Oslo, referring to the peace accords. Do you think that right now what we're looking at is a world where we see Israelis militarily occupying, which some had already claimed was happening previous to these attacks? And then, two, how are they going to stop those who have suicide vests, who go on stabbing rampages? I mean, how can they really change the culture and the context of what Gazans and what Palestinians have had there for generations?
Let's separate the two areas. Gaza, the Israelis have not occupied by any measure since the mid-2000s. And then the West Bank is a different story. I think what we're seeing is a realization by the Israelis, and I think it's a real one, that the path that Oslo, which was the sort of the beginning of this two-state solution concept, put us on, isn't going to work. And that's because of where the Palestinian street is, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. 75% of Palestinians support October 7th. It's very difficult to have an agreement and live in peace. And we're talking about, that on the north side of the Chicago River and the south side of the Chicago River. We're talking about areas that are next to each other, that are streets across from each other. It's impossible to live across the street in peace from someone who is excited and supports the slaughter of 1,200 of your people and the raping and pillaging of towns. So I think what you're hearing from the Israelis is this sort of realization that a two-state solution, as we have always thought about it, needs to be rethought. And I think you're going to start seeing, at least by the Israelis, a lot of pressure on the Arab world to start stepping up and changing how they view the Palestinian conflict and where the money is. Because right now there's an awful lot of money in inflaming the Palestinian issue. There's an awful lot of money in teaching the Palestinians that suicide bombing is a good thing and something to be excited about, and that Israelis are evil and the Holocaust didn't happen, and all of the indoctrination that happens in the UN schools, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. I think if that changes, and I think that's what you're hearing the Israelis push for, then they are going to be more willing to make some kind of broader deal.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.